Hello and welcome to A Woman's Heart. I'm Lisa Granger. Setting goals and managing your time well are things we do all year long, but especially at the beginning of a new year or a new season. I asked one of the most efficient and productive people I know to help us with this. Marnie Swedberg has a long list of accomplishments on her resume, and she has learned some valuable lessons in how to maintain a joyful attitude while managing multiple tasks, even when life goes sideways. This is going to be a fabulous year with several milestones, so make sure you follow or subscribe to the podcast and don't miss an episode. I'd love to hear what your favorite shows have been and what you would like to see in the future. Catch me on social media or my website, lisagranger.com. Now for the conversation with Marnie. Welcome to A Woman's Heart. I am so excited. Today we have Marnie Swedberg, and I have known Marnie for a while, and I am so excited to have you on the show as a guest, Marnie. Thanks so much for joining us today.
So great to be here. Thanks, Lisa. Excited.
Yes. Well, you are very welcome. It is my honor and privilege to have you here because I know you are a very busy woman and lots of things on your plate, and you just do so much good in so many ways, and I thoroughly appreciate that. But before we go on, I would love for people to get to know you. So tell us a little bit about yourself, and I like to ask for something fun that isn't normally in your bio.
Well, I will start with something very fun. My parents, not knowing that they were doing this, named me Joyful Joy. So my name is Marnie Joy, and they did not know that in Hebrew, the word Marnie means joyful. And so by
Oh.
accident, not by accident at all, in God's great providence, they named me Joyful Joy. And so it's my joy to be
Yes.
who I am in Christ and to encourage you guys to be who you are in Christ. So that's really fun. I think, you can read my whole bio. I've written books and speak all over and do that kind of thing. But I think what I want to share with you right now, because we're going to be talking about time here, is I want to share our last little season here, which it was 2 hurricanes back to back. We live in Florida.
Yeah.
And our home was spared, but just barely.
Mm.
Many of our neighbors lost their homes. My sister's family lost their home. In fact, they moved in with us for about 2.5. They left right before Christmas. That went to bring back my mother-in-law, who's 99, who's now living with us through the spring. So when we're talking about time management today and about getting stuff done, you're going to have seasons that are going to throw a wrench in all of your best laid plans. And you're going to have to know how to be flexible and roll with it. And what I want to start with is that Elizabeth Elliot defined humility as flexibility. And that has been a tremendous aid to me in my time management and in my life, because when I say to someone, I think I'm getting a little more humble, they say, I think maybe not. But when I say to God or to myself or to someone else, I see myself becoming more flexible. That is something that is actually, you can actually track it. You could feel it. If you're being just rigid with a time schedule, rigid with things, or if you're really flowing with what God's going to have you do this week, this month, this year.
Oh my gosh, yes. I've never thought of flexibility and humility together, but I can see that. And the whole idea of being flexible. And to say, I've noticed that I can be a little bit more flexible than I used to be, but I also say I get flexible to a point and then I hit critical mass where I just can't, I get overwhelmed and I just can't be flexible anymore. It's like, no, too many changes. I've done one too many changes, one too many pivots, one too many whatever else, rethink and go through. And then it's like my brain cramps and I just can't be flexible anymore.
This is such a good thing that you said that too, because I don't believe it's to be flexible and to just do everything everybody else tells us to do. I don't think that's at all what God's looking for in us. In fact, I have a saying that I'm kind of famous for. It's that there is time to do everything God wants us to do.
Yeah.
And then I follow that up with there's not time to do everything. There's not time to do everything good. There's not time to do everything everybody else thinks I should do. And there's not even time to do everything I want to do. But because God is God, there absolutely has to be time to do everything he wants me to do. And in walking in that flexibility,
Yeah.
we find peace and joy, really supernaturally eternal results versus just getting through the day.
Yeah, I remember a long time ago reading somewhere that if our to-do list can't be done in a day, the list didn't come from God. And I went, oh, because there are times, I mean, I'll have this long to-do list and I'll look at it and like, there is absolutely no humanly way possible to complete all of this in one day. And I said, so obviously some of this isn't coming from God because he wouldn't ask us to do something that is truly impossible for us to do in our earthly human constraints.
I want to pull the shame or the feeling of, somehow you should have known that in advance or whatever. I want to pull that part, just apart a little bit, because sometimes I think it goes on our to-do list in order to make us aware that it's coming toward us.
Okay.
So maybe not today, right? Maybe not
Yeah.
today. The other thing is we've had those supernatural days where at the end you look and you just look at all that God done and it was not humanly possible. But because of how God put things, I just had one of these 2 Saturdays ago when I got up in the morning and I couldn't do it. But what happened is I would hit a certain point on a project. I'd be done with everything I could do right there. But I thought of somebody who I could ask to take it to the next level. I did that like 5 times in a row. It
Wow.
was so supernaturally charged that by 1 o'clock in the afternoon on that Saturday, I actually went and had a private retreat with God where him and I just sat quietly for about 2 hours. So I want you to know that sometimes you do have too much on your to-do list for you to do, but God still can flow that through. Or it might be just because he's doing a little heads up. This is coming. Get ready.
Yes, yes. Well, because there's a lot of value sometimes in, I think I've seen it referred to as a brain dump, where
Absolutely.
you just kind of, okay, you get it out of your head and you get it on the paper. So then you can tell your brain it's okay. You don't have to hold all of it at once. It's down on the piece of paper. We can just slowly strike things off as they go. It doesn't all have to be done in one day. It can get parceled out over a longer period of time, but there can be value in that, just kind of sitting down and going, okay, this is what I want to get done, and oh yeah, this and this and this and this, and just dump it all on a piece of paper where you can go back and refer to it.
Love that. Just love it.
And then I think it's helpful too when you're breaking down a larger goal to then be able to write down all the little pieces and then put them in priority of which one really should happen first versus second, as opposed to trying to do the last thing first and then that being really, really hard.
Yeah. So if you think of it like a wedding, what you have is you have a wedding planner and it's a year in advance, 6 months in advance, 3 months in advance, 2 months in advance, 1 month in advance, 2 weeks in advance, like that.
We're doing that countdown now.
Yes, right, exactly. So depending on how big of a project it is, you really do have to start with the end in mind and work backwards from there, because that's the only way you're going to actually be on time when it comes to 2 weeks before the event. But if it's a smaller thing, like just clean the kitchen, then you're just going to be able to go do that, as you can fit it in. One of the things that I've loved about having a to-do list for the day, I don't even do it anymore because it's so subconscious to me. I just do it automatically. But for a while, I used an Excel spreadsheet, and I would actually type my stuff into the Excel spreadsheet. This was when I was managing a restaurant, managing our retail store, homeschooling our children, running womenspeakers.com. And so it was so insane. Some days I would have like 42 or something on that piece of paper, and I couldn't mentally manage it. It was too many things. But what I learned to do during that season of life was I put it into an Excel. I would put on the left side, if it had a time deadline, I would next put how many minutes or hours or weeks I thought it would take to accomplish this. And then I would put, a priority level. Like if I could only get one thing done today, what would it be? Number 2, number 3, like that, and down a little way. And sometimes I would just batch, like these are all number 1s, these are all number 3s, like that. And so that what I found though, that did shock me. I mean, everybody can tell by doing that I would be on time for the things that had their most critical deadlines. But the thing that surprised me about it was I had multiple things on those lists that were only 5 or 8 or 15 minute long. And what I would have, I would see, okay, I've got this podcast interview coming up with Lisa in 20 minutes. I can knock 3 of these things out.
Yeah.
Whereas before, I would have just sat there looking at my list, going, I don't know. There's so many things to do. I don't know what to do. So having it structured down that far. And again, we're talking like if you have 6 things on your list, probably don't need an Excel.
Yeah.
But if your life is in one of those complicated seasons, you will find that just getting the brain dump, like you said, I always say when it's in my head, I have a million things to do. When I write it down, it's only 122. It's still a lot, but it's doable. Now it's doable. Now you can at least see it isn't endless. It isn't hopeless. You can actually manage it.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Well, and I keep thinking, at the beginning of the year, a lot of people like to make their New Year's resolutions or their
Right.
goals and set their goals for the year. And then studies say that most people, they've left it by the end of January. I mean,
Right.
it's gone. But in my mind, there's a combination. One, the goal may not have been very realistic. You may not have really thought about the goal and set a good goal to begin with. And then you may not have put things in place to be able to follow through. So as far as making for, people that are doing their New Year's resolutions and their
Yeah,
goals,
yeah, yeah.
because it's still all time related and then
Yeah,
breaking
yeah.
down, and we've kind of touched on little pieces of it that fall into that. What would you say to encourage people, or how have you found, a process in how to set a good goal and then be able to implement it?
Yeah, so I think I love goals, and I think the Bible talks about vision,
Mm-hmm.
about how important without a vision, the people perish. We are built to be goal setters. So even maybe I'm thinking ahead tonight. We have plans with my daughter's family, and I'm thinking ahead of the things that I need to do today in order to be ready to leave at a certain time to go tonight
Mm-hmm.
to do this with her family. Those are goals. They're all goals.
Yeah.
So instead of making a goal a big, audacious thing, in fact, look at it kind of like you get up in the morning and you brush your teeth. The goal is just part of your life. This is just another part of your life.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of demystify it a little bit and make it more of a normal thing. And then set a goal that is small enough for you to actually know for sure that you can achieve it. So the reason most people give up on their big, hairy, audacious goals in the new year is because they are too big, literally too big. But let's say that you say, by the end of the year, I'd like to be able to do such and such. Well, let's go backwards. Same way wedding. Let's go backwards. What would you need to
Mm-hmm.
do by the 6 month point? What would you need to do by the 3 month point? So, what would be the smallest action you can take right now that is going to lead you to being on time for your 3 month or your 1 month goal? And if you do it that way, you're going to succeed more than you'll fail. The other reason we fail, and we call it procrastination, because the goal is probably something you truly want to do.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of guilt that's associated with procrastination that I think is wrongly applied. Procrastination is when the mind is facing a challenge that it has 2 things it really wants to do, and it doesn't know which one is the most important. And so the analogies, I'm going to give you a couple analogies. One is you're coming up, you're driving down the street, there's some stoplights on the road you're on, you're going 40 or whatever, and you're coming up to a stop and go light, and it turns yellow. And in that moment, your foot sometimes does this thing from the gas to the brake pedal, like not quite sure. Back and forth, back and forth.
Yeah.
I don't know. And you either slam on the brake or you slam on the gas, one of the two, right?
Yeah.
So procrastination is your brain hovering over, am I supposed to really go for this? Or am I really not ready to go for this?
Mm.
So give yourself some grace there. And when you feel that tension between, I really want to do it, but I can't get myself to get going on it, there's something there. There is some incongruence that's still not quite lined up with it. And just give yourself some grace to figure it out and to come up with a goal that you actually get to press on the gas and go for it.
Yeah, yeah. No, I hadn't heard about procrastination as being indecisiveness between
Yeah.
trying to choose between 2 things. Now, I've heard I've heard Joyce Meyer call it suicide on the installment plan, which is a little harsh, but at the same time, it's that. But I've also heard that procrastination can be linked a lot to depression or anxiety or a lot of that because there's a lot of indecision. And then you mentioned there's a lot of shame behind it too because we think, oh, well, we should have done it quicker or we should have done it here, but then we put it off. And there's sometimes I know for me, I do procrastinate at times. And it can be because it does seem so big, it's so intimidating. And so it's scary. And so I'll put off and I'll do something quick and easy and then wait until then it's hard. And then it's more stressful.
Yeah, so there are stall tactics, and that's kind of a different thing than what I'm talking about. When you want to do it, you know you can do it. You could start on it, and you're just choosing to watch video shorts instead. Okay, that's one thing. But honestly, one of the things that I've come to see very clearly, and I think it's Psalm 18, where it's talking about God rises up in anger against the enemy and he slays the enemy. And I've come to understand that passage to be the enemy of our souls, who has sold us a lie that has crippled us and made us not able to say yes, not able to actually do the things that we were created to do the things that we want to do the things that God has laid out in front of us and prepared us to do. But because we are believing a lie, we can't say yes to that. We procrastinate because there's a confusion there. There's the lie that's telling us you can't, or this isn't a good, healthy thing for you to do, or you really need to do something else or whatever. And then there's the truth of what God's calling us to do. So have you ever heard of muscle activation therapy?
I've not heard of that
MAT.
particular. No, I've heard of
So
lots of
it's
others, but not that one.
it's such a beautiful analogy of this because what happens is that our bodies, when the body faces some kind of a challenge, let's say that I hurt my left leg.
Okay.
Well, my right leg is going to overcompensate, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's going
Yeah.
to come in and
Yeah.
save the day for me so that I can keep moving. But what happens is during that, some of the connections, some of the firing that usually happens in my left leg while it is healing, it's going to turn off. And when I go to walk on my left leg again after a while, after it gets better, all of my cylinders are not firing properly. It
Yeah.
takes a while to
Mm-hmm.
get things going. Okay. So muscle activation therapy finds hidden ones of those that have over time in our lives just stopped working. And so the therapist, he'll say, okay, I'm going to press against your hand and you press back against mine. Okay. And you go to press against the hand and your hand literally flies away. It can't. There's nothing there. In a particular position, you have no activation to actually respond. That's in a muscle. Now that's happening in our minds and our souls and our emotions as well. It's happening in your relationships where you want to. I mean, I can't even tell you how many times during therapy I would feel terrible and be like, I'm so sorry. I meant to push. I was trying to push. I couldn't push. And he's like, no, there's nothing you can do about it. It's not activated. And it really taught me about our emotional, spiritual, relational lives that sometimes we are really trying to push in the way we want to, the way we want to go. But there is a procrastination there because there's a false evidence appearing real to us that's causing us not to be able to respond. So I feel like if it's a goal that you're not being able to reach, something you want to do that you just can't get yourself to do, I'm just going to ask you to just sit with Jesus a little bit and say, God, here, because I actually want to do this.
Mm-hmm.
So what is standing in my way? And the thing is that God is the master healer, the great physician. He loves you. If it's his goal for your life, believe me, he will help you do it. So don't be so hard on yourself. And all of these phrases, I mean, you've had several during this conversation that people have said to you that can kind of cause us to feel guilt and shame and like it's hopeless and how come I'm such a loser? God is never speaking to us like that.
No.
And while the information is maybe helpful, the way that we speak it to ourselves, let's be careful how we talk to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So if you wouldn't say that to a friend of yours, don't say it to yourself. If you hear yourself saying harsh, cruel things, just remember, if you wouldn't say that to the most loved friend you have, just don't say it to yourself and don't let anybody else say it to you, because That's the enemy that God stands up against, is the lies that come to our souls.
Yeah.
That's who he fights against, is the lies. And they're usually coming from the pit of hell.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, they are. And you're right. There are so many times when we are our own worst critic, and
Yeah.
we wouldn't say those kinds of things to somebody else,
Yeah.
and yet we will say them to ourselves. And you're like, why am I doing that? But
Well, and other preachers and teachers
oh
say it, right?
yeah,
Other preachers to get a point across, which is legit. But just be careful. Let's be careful that we tenderly nurture our souls, because they actually belong to God, and
mm-hmm.
he wants us to. So
Yeah,
be kind to you. Be kind to you.
yeah. Now, are some of those? I think we probably touched on all of them, because one of my questions was going to be, what are some of the most common challenges that you have found? Because you do a lot of coaching with a lot of
Yeah.
different people.
Mhm.
And I know everyone's unique in their particular
Mhm.
personality and their particular situations in that. But at the same time, when you coach a lot of different people, you kind of start seeing some patterns and some boiled down commonalities. So
Yeah.
I think we've probably touched on some of them. What would you say are some of the more common challenges in either setting goals or managing our time that people have come up against? And what are some of the things that work to overcome that, or at least manage it a little
Yeah.
better?
I love that. And one of the things that comes right to mind is trying to do it like everybody else, or like someone in
Mm,
particular, trying to be like somebody. I was just talking to someone yesterday, and she said, I have a coach. I have had a coach before, and I have a coach now that's telling me you have to niche down, only do one thing. You're all scattered. You're too scattered. And I'm like, not you. You are not too scattered. This is
mm,
who you are. You are actually built to be that jack of many trades. That's how God has moved you around. Now, other people, someone else maybe needs to niche down. But the thing is that when we hear something and we go, "Oh, that sounds good," or "Look at the results they had," then
yeah.
I caution you. I caution you to go back to Jesus. I like to say it this way: the bicycle thought he was really amazing because he won the race, until a race car zoomed by and he thought, "Wow, I'm hardly moving." And the
Mm,
race car thought he was incredible because he won the Indy 500, until he saw a plane go overhead. He thought, "Wow, I'm trapped down here on Earth." And the jet plane thought he was amazing until he saw a rocket ship go into outer space, and he thought, "Man, I'm trapped in the Earth's hemisphere." And the rocket ship thought he was amazing till he saw a shooting star. And you know what? If we're going to compare ourselves to anybody else, we're always going to be disappointed about something.
mm-hmm.
But if we are just going to go to Jesus and say, "How did you create me? What did you make me to be, to do, to enjoy, to share?" I have this RES: receive, enjoy, share, receive, enjoy, share, receive,
Mm,
enjoy, share. So if God isn't giving it to me, it's not going to be enjoyable when I try to do it. And as I share it, it's not going to be authentic.
yeah.
Who are you receiving from? Because when you're receiving from God, you're going to find what he gives you to be perfect for how he created you. A new bicycle seat, awesome, but the airplane doesn't need it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. No,
you
you're
know,
you're right.
I mean, if we're trying to be something and do something that we were never created to, we will always be miserable. We will
Yeah.
never meet our goals because they aren't actually in our wheelhouse. So, yeah, we can do anything we set our mind to do, unless me, Marnie, at 5'5", wants to be Michael Jordan, then it's just not going to happen. And I can be as
No.
upset as I want about it. But the reality is, we can't actually do everything we set our minds to do.
Mm-hmm.
We can absolutely do everything God created us to do. And that's where the gold is, right there.
Yeah, yes, it is. When you mentioned the person that was being told to niche down, and that no, they didn't necessarily need to. That was, how God made them to have a lot of different things. The idea of multitasking came up. And I know growing up, it was all the idea of, oh, being able to multitask, and women can multitask, and you can have the baby on the hip, and, especially as a wife and a mom, and, you do lots of different things. But the studies are showing that really you're toggling back and forth, and multitasking isn't nearly as efficient as people have touted it to be
Okay.
through the ages. So I'm going to let you tackle the multitasking thing for a little bit.
Okay, so here's my situation is that I am a master multitasker
Mm-hmm.
because of one thing. I am a super fast switcher.
Mm.
So that's what it is. It's actually, you can't consciously do 10 things at once.
Yeah.
However, we know from driving a vehicle that we can do multiple things at once.
Yes.
We can drive. Our hands are steering, our feet are doing things, or we're talking on the phone, or we're listening to the radio, or we're thinking about what's coming next. We're getting the directions correctly. Our brains are fantastic multitaskers. Just God created. If we couldn't multitask, we would be dead, 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 dead.
Oh yeah, that's true. Because the
Okay,
lungs
so
have to be working at the same time as the
how
heart and the gut and everything
Yes,
else.
exactly. So, how are they defining it? Their definition of multitask is a very limited. And when we apply it across the board, it simply doesn't work. So, when we apply it the exact way they say it, yes, okay. And if you think men's brains work in boxes,
Yes.
women's brains work in noodles and spaghetti all entangled up.
Mm-hmm.
Women are fantastic multitaskers. Now, having said that, I've had friends, missionaries, people stay with us for even a month at a time, sometimes on furlough or whatever. Ladies say to me, how can you do that? You're doing like 12 things at once. I can only do one thing at once. Once again, if we try to be like somebody else, it's not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
When I try to slow down and do it like other people, I can't think. My brain doesn't work like that. I always say I'm a jet plane. I'm flying fast and far. And then
Yes.
when I'm not flying fast and far, I'm flat out on the tarmac. I mean, literally, I'm flat out on my bed and I'm gone. That's just it. When I get up, I'm on again. And that's how I roll. And so when we allow studies, when we allow people's best advice, when we allow people to put us in a box and to say this is how it works for some people in our study, just remember you're like nobody else. You're like
Yeah.
nobody else.
Well, and I've noticed I can do a couple of different things and I can think of something and go, "Oh, wait a minute. Okay, get this done,"
Yeah.
and then get up and do this. But if there's too many unfinished things going on at once,
Yes.
and I can feel like the anxiety and the small
Yep.
hyperventilation going on, I liken it to I have two different phrases, and one is I have too many balls in the air, kind of
Yep.
like you're juggling a little too many things, and I need to like take one, finish it, set it aside so I only have the others left, or I have too many windows open on the computer. It's like when the computer has
And
like
it
five,
shuts.
yeah, and it's just like, nope, no more. I can't
I'm
handle
not helping you
anymore. I'm not
anymore.
helping. You just start, slowing down to sludge level. And it's like, no, I need to finish something, shut that window, finish something, set that ball aside, and focus on one thing. And then I can go back to the others.
Yeah.
So I reach, a point where it's like, okay, that's got just a few too many windows open.
That's awesome. Mine is I'm juggling a lot of balls right now. And then sometimes I say, I'm just watching balls just bounce all around me.
Yes.
And
Yes.
not juggling any of them. They're all just bouncing. I remember one time we had the restaurant, we had the retail store. It was early days, just still in the learning curve, which were so painful. And I remember just falling into bed one night to do my little tarmac recharge thing. And I said to God as I fell into bed, God, it's out of control. It's just all out of control. And he just said to me, Marnie, out of whose control?
Mm,
Sometimes when our balls are all bouncing, when we have too many windows open, he just says, take a nap, rest a minute, take a pause, finish one thing, go to bed, forgive somebody, whatever it
hmm
is, just take a pause and then go back and do what you've been created to do. And it'll work. Don't worry. God's got you. No,
Yeah.
no shame, no blame, no worries. I always define failure as feedback. From God's perspective, I'm perfect in Christ. So failure is feedback. I just have to look at it and say, what did you want me to learn there?
Yeah, yeah. No, and there's so much value in that and going, okay, well, that didn't work out very well. So what can I learn?
Yep.
I've learned not to do it like that again. Uh,
Yep.
and
For
maybe there's a
sure.
better way to do this. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yes.
what Thomas Edison said. He didn't fail. He just learned 10,000 ways not to do a light bulb.
Right. I mean, that it's such a great analogy for all of us. And we hear it and we smile and we laugh, but we don't
Yeah.
personalize it and
hmm
say, right. it's going to take me multiple failures before I learn from a baby how to crawl, toddle, walk, run, jump, drive a car. I mean, it's not going to be a fast scenario.
Yeah.
And yet we enter some seasons and we say, I should be able to do this. Other people can do it. What's the matter with me? And it's like, yeah, well, they have a different background experience than you do.
Yeah, yeah. They have a different personality. They have a different time frame.
Yeah.
They have a different situation. Maybe they did. Maybe
Absolutely.
they did lose their house, and all of a sudden they're,
Right.
you know, as you mentioned with all of that, because there are definitely interruptions, which is one of my challenges. I'll have my plan, and then here comes life, interruptions after interruptions, and it can be very frustrating. And like as I told you earlier, I've had some frustrations going on, and so I've had to take a couple of deep breaths, and then I just take a little break, and then let my brain calm down, and then I'm like, okay, now we can go back to it.
Absolutely.
All of that. Well, Marnie, you were such a wealth of information, and I know you would have so many other good tips. But one of the things that I like to wrap up, and I know we've kind of touched on some of the ideas that people can use to do this, but I would love to ask you, what would you say to encourage someone to pursue the passion that God has placed in their heart? Because I know you've said several times that God has made us special to do something He has called us to do, and that's what we're supposed to be focusing on doing. So what would you say to encourage them to do that?
It's so fun. I like to say it this way. When God strung together your 3 billion base pairs of DNA, He did it in a particular way. And He knows exactly what He created you to do. There's no question in His mind where you will be the happiest, where you will be the most delighted, where you will be the most useful now and for eternity. And so my call to you would be to have faith in God and spend some time dreaming. You know, we talked earlier about a Saturday a couple of weeks ago that I got so much done. Well, what happened on that Saturday morning was that I had sat down and said, what do you want me to do today? And God was like, what would you like to do today? This is the God we serve. Out of all those many things, that was what I wanted to do, was have a little retreat with Him. And then after that came this idea for these 5 other things that needed to be done. And I thought, it'll never happen. It's never going to happen. But by 1 o'clock, all those other things were done to the full level of what I could do on them that day. And I went and got my mini retreat with God. So I just want to tell you, He has created you to be a particular way. Can I tell one more story?
Yes.
I've written over 40 songs. Some of them are sung around the world through the CCLI music program that churches use. And for many years, I would just sit and sing them in my living room. Basically, if I wrote a song, sometimes I would sing them for my church if I thought it was especially good. But, you know, mostly I would just sing them in my living room. This one day, I'm sitting in my living room playing one of these new songs that I just love so much. And I just stopped and I looked up and I'm like, what is the deal with this? Why do you keep giving me these amazing songs if I'm just going to sit here in my living room and sing them? It just seems so pointless. But you know what I heard in my heart? From God, I heard, Marnie, this is the only place in the universe I can come to hear these songs. Do you think I care whether they get published? Whether anybody ever hears them? If my creator God wants to hear them through this ridiculous voice and body and fuel level, I am just going to sing with my whole heart. See, this is what it's like when we know who we are in Christ and just let Him flow through us anything He wants.
Yeah, no, amen. That's beautiful. I love that's the only place that He can go to hear that. That's beautiful. Well, Marnie, if people want to connect with you and learn some more about your books, your songs, your coaching, all of the other things that you do, what is the best way for them to connect with you?
Well, I am old enough and have a unique enough name that I got my own name. So it's MARNIE.com, Marnie.com. So everything's right over there.
Very good. Very good. Well, Marnie, thank you so much for all of that great information and jump-starting on the new year and for just being the joyful person that you are. I really appreciate you spending time with us today.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. Love being here. Thanks, you guys.
Thanks so much for joining me today on A Woman's Heart. I'm Lisa Granger. I hope you got some good information from this conversation with Marnie Swedberg to help reach your goals, large or small, in the coming year. I know I took several notes. One of my goals is to serve you, my listeners, well this year. Make sure you follow the podcast, which can be found on all major podcast platforms, and let me know what your favorite shows have been and what you would like to see in the future. You can catch me on social media or my website, lisagranger.com. Until next time, have a blessed day.